The sun hung low over the sleepy town of Willow Creek, casting long golden shadows across the quiet streets. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and nothing ever seemed to happen. At least, that's what people thought. Down a winding back road, where wildflowers spilled over the cracked sidewalks and the wind carried the faint scent of fresh-cut grass, a young girl walked alone. Her name was Lila, 11 years old, fierce in spirit but gentle at heart. In one hand, she clutched a worn canvas backpack swinging against her side. In the other, she held the leather leash of her most loyal companion, a German shepherd named Blaze. To most, Blaze looked like any other dog, a little bigger, a little sharper-eyed perhaps, but still just someone's pet. People smiled as they passed, never guessing that this dog once stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers in places far more dangerous than Willow Creek. Blaze had scars beneath his thick fur, marks that told silent stories of loyalty, of battles fought and promises made. But Lila never saw the scars. She only knew that Blaze had been there for her, always. Ever since her father, retired military K-9 handler, had brought Blaze home, the dog had become more than a guardian. He was her shadow, her shield, her silent vow that she would never walk alone. That afternoon, the sky was turning a soft, bruised purple, and a cool breeze whispered through the trees. Blaze padded quietly at Lila's side, ears perked, his gait relaxed, but his amber eyes scanning the surroundings with the instincts of a warrior. They were heading home, after visiting her grandmother's house, a path Lila had taken 100 times. She felt safe here. She had no reason to look over her shoulder, no reason to quicken her step. Not yet. Far behind them, the low rumble of engines stirred the stillness of the evening air. 3 motorcycles, roaring louder than they should, their riders weaving in and out of the deserted streets like sharks scenting blood. Blaze's head lifted, muscles tensing just slightly. A subtle shift, almost imperceptible. Lila noticed the change. She tightened her grip on the leash, a ripple of unease prickling her skin. She didn't know it yet, but trouble was coming. And trouble had no idea what it was about to walk into. The motorcycles grew louder. Their engines snarled through the silence of Willow Creek, disrupting the peaceful lull of twilight. The 3 riders approached like a storm front. Black leather jackets, scratched helmets, and an attitude that stank of trouble. Blaze stiffened. Lila's small hand instinctively tightened on the leash. She glanced back over her shoulder, heart skipping a beat. The bikers weren't just passing through. They slowed down. They were following her. Blaze uttered a low growl, so quiet Lila could feel it rumbling through the leash. "Easy, boy," she whispered, but even she heard the quiver in her own voice. One of the bikers, the biggest of the 3, revved his engine in a taunting growl, pulling alongside the sidewalk where Lila walked. He removed his helmet with a cocky flourish, revealing a face unshaven and mean, twisted in a sneer. "Well, well, look what we have here," he called out. Another biker, younger and wirier, laughed harshly. "What's a sweet thing like you doing all alone out here?" he jeered. Blaze moved, subtle but firm, stepping between Lila and the curb. His tail stiff, his muscles coiled, every fiber of his being alert. "Going home," Lila said, trying to sound braver than she felt. The 3rd biker, silent until now, reached into his jacket. Lila's stomach turned to ice. A rope. A long, frayed rope. The lead biker grinned, flashing yellow teeth. "Why don't we give you a ride?" Lila backed away, but the bikers dismounted with heavy boots hitting the pavement, their movements slow and mocking. Blaze let out a warning bark, loud and sharp. The bikers froze for a half-second. Then the big one laughed and spat on the ground. "What's the mutt gonna do? Lick us to death?" Blaze's body lowered, muscles rippling under his fur. His ears pinned back. His eyes, usually so gentle with Lila, hardened into focused steel. The younger biker lunged. In a flash, Blaze exploded into motion. He hit the young man squarely in the chest with a controlled, bone-jarring impact that sent the biker sprawling backward onto the asphalt, gasping for air. The rope fell from his hands, forgotten. The lead biker cursed and swung a heavy boot at Blaze. But Blaze ducked, pivoted, and snapped his jaws onto the man's calf with a precision bite. Not to maim, but to incapacitate. The man screamed, crumpling to the ground. Lila stood frozen, wide-eyed, clutching the leash even though Blaze no longer needed it. The third biker hesitated, torn between helping his friends and saving his own skin. Blaze turned his head, locking eyes with him, daring him to make a move. He didn't. He dropped his helmet and ran. Tires screeched as the remaining motorcycles peeled away into the night, leaving their companions groaning on the pavement. Sirens wailed in the distance. A neighbor, an elderly man who had been watering his rose bushes, had witnessed enough to call the police. Blaze returned to Lila's side, his body still taut with readiness, but his eyes flicking to her, checking, reassuring. She fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face into his fur, tears spilling freely now. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy, Blaze." The police arrived minutes later. Officers spilled from their cruisers, weapons drawn, until they took in the scene. 2 injured bikers moaning on the ground, a young girl holding on to her dog for dear life. Blaze stood firm, but calm. Posture disciplined, almost military. One of the officers, a grizzled man with silver at his temples, approached cautiously. His eyes widened as he took a closer look at Blaze. "I'll be damned," he muttered. "That's a K9 stance if I ever saw one." Lila's father arrived moments after, his truck tires crunching the gravel as he skidded to a stop. He jumped out, rushing to Lila, scooping her up into his arms. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" She nodded into his chest, her body trembling. Blaze sat beside them, alert but composed. One of the officers approached Lila's father, lowering his voice. "Sir, that dog of yours, is he trained?" The father glanced at Blaze, pride shining in his eyes. "He's more than trained," he said quietly. "He's a retired K9. Worked with the military. Saved lives overseas." The officers exchanged looks of astonishment and newfound respect. "Well, he just saved another one today," the officer said, nodding at Lila. The next morning, news traveled fast. Local papers ran headlines. K9, hero saves girl from biker attack. Neighbors who once smiled absently at Blaze now crossed the street to shake Lila's father's hand, to drop off treats and new chew toys for the 4-legged warrior. But Blaze didn't care about fame. He only cared about Lila. Wherever she went, he was there. A silent sentinel at her side. At night, when nightmares clawed at the edges of Lila's mind, Blaze would press his broad head against her chest, grounding her, reminding her that she was never alone. And, if anyone dared to threaten her again, they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Because Blaze wasn't just a dog, he was a soldier. And she was his mission. Blaze's story spread beyond Willow Creek. By the end of the week, local TV stations were running segments on him. Reporters crowded Lila's front yard, cameras flashing, microphones reaching. The town's mayor personally visited to present Blaze with a Medal of Bravery, pinning it ceremoniously onto his thick collar. Lila stood proudly beside him, her hand never straying from his back. But amidst the accolades and attention, Blaze remained unchanged. He wasn't seeking recognition. He didn't understand fame. His world was simpler. Lila was safe. That was all that mattered. As the months passed, life slowly returned to normal. Lila resumed her walks, though now her routes were always a little busier. Neighbors and friends often happened to be outside whenever she passed. A silent community watch inspired by a little girl and her dog. Blaze aged gracefully, but hints of silver crept into his fur. His steps became slower, though his eyes remained sharp as ever. Lila grew, too. She no longer needed to clutch his leash tightly. Instead, they moved as one, their bond unspoken, their trust absolute. One autumn afternoon, as golden leaves tumbled around them, Lila sat with Blaze on the front porch, her head resting against his shoulder. "You're not just my dog," she murmured. "You're my guardian angel." Blaze licked her hand, his way of saying, "Always." Years later, when Lila graduated high school, Blaze was there. He stood by her side in the family photos, a graying but proud figure, a medal of valor still polished and gleaming around his neck. Guests at the ceremony often remarked about the girl who had been saved by her dog, and who had, in turn, saved him by giving him a home and a purpose after his service. At college, Lila kept a framed photo of Blaze on her desk, a reminder of the loyalty, courage, and love that had shaped her life. Blaze passed quietly one winter evening. Lila sat with him under a sky freckled with stars, whispering all the things she had never needed to say aloud, but said anyway. "You kept your promise," she whispered, tears falling freely. "You kept me safe." Blaze laid his head in her lap, gave one last sigh, and was gone. The town mourned. Flags were lowered. Candles were lit. Stories were shared of the day Blaze became more than a dog. He became a symbol. Lila's father built a small monument in the town square, a bronze statue of a German shepherd standing tall, head high, eyes forever watching. At the base, an inscription: Guardian, Soldier, Friend. Blaze, the heart of Willow Creek. And Lila? She carried Blaze with her. Always. In her dreams, she still felt him walking beside her, silent and steadfast. When storms rattled the windows of her dorm room, she would smile through the fear, remembering the unwavering strength pressed against her side. When life grew hard, she would reach for the courage Blaze had taught her, to stand firm, to protect those you love, and to meet the world not with fear, but with fierce, unbreakable loyalty. Blaze had been more than a protector. He had been a compass, pointing her toward the very best parts of herself. And though his paws no longer trod the earth beside her, his spirit ran with her in every step, every heartbeat, every breath. Because some bonds are not broken by time. They are written into the soul. Forever. The seasons cycled forward, as they always do. Years passed, but the memory of Blaze never faded. In Willow Creek, his bronze statue remained a beacon of hope and strength. Visitors often left flowers, dog treats, or handwritten notes at the base, thanking a hero they had never met, but somehow still knew. For Lila, the pain of losing Blaze softened with time, though it never disappeared. After finishing college, Lila made a decision that surprised no one who knew her heart. She enrolled in the police academy, determined to honor Blaze's legacy by following in his footsteps, or rather paw prints. Training was brutal. Days blurred into nights. Obstacle courses, firearms training, endless tests of strength and will. But Lila persevered, driven by a silent promise she had made under the starlit sky on Blaze's last night, to protect others the way he had protected her. During her training, Lila gravitated naturally toward the K9 unit. When it came time to pair recruits with their K9 partners, her instructors already knew who the perfect candidate was. His name was Valor, a young, fierce German shepherd with a spirit so stubborn that no other handler had been able to bond with him. Until Lila. The first time they met, Valor had paced the edges of his kennel, growling low. Other trainees backed away. Lila didn't. She knelt by the gate, removed her gloves, and pressed her bare hand flat against the cold metal. "I know you're scared," she said softly. "I was too, once." Valor paused, wary. Slowly, he approached, sniffing the air between them. His nose bumped her hand. Connection. Not forced. not commanded, earned. From that day on, Lila and Valor became inseparable. Their first assignment was in a neighboring city, a search and rescue mission after a devastating flood swept through the region. Buildings crumbled, streets turned into rivers. People were missing, desperate. Lila and Valor waded through the chaos, their bond tested with every challenge. One night, exhausted and soaked to the bone, Valor caught a scent. Without hesitation, he surged forward, leading Lila through broken streets and unstable debris. Beneath a collapsed house, in a pocket of air, they found a little boy clutching a stuffed dog. He was scared, shivering, barely conscious. Lila dropped to her knees, wrapping him in her jacket as Valor stood guard, barking sharply to summon help. The boy's parents wept when they were reunited. Later, a news reporter shoved a microphone toward Lila, asking how she had known where to search. Lila simply smiled and said, "I trusted my partner." She didn't mean just Valor. She meant Blaze, too. Years blurred forward. Lila and Valor built a reputation as one of the best K9 teams in the region. They found missing hikers lost in dense forests. They protected schools during security threats. They stood shoulder to shoulder with fellow officers during the city's darkest days. Each success, each life saved, each tear wiped away. Lila felt Blaze's spirit smiling with pride. On the anniversary of Blaze's passing, Lila made a tradition. Every year, she and Valor would return to Willow Creek. They would sit by Blaze's statue in the town square as the sun set, and Lila would tell Valor stories. Stories of a courageous dog who once stood against darkness without fear. Valor would listen, head tilted, as if he understood every word. Maybe he did. Maybe some bonds, once formed, ripple across time and space. One year, as Lila and Valor sat beneath Blaze's statue, an old woman approached. She carried a photograph, worn and folded, of a young girl and a fierce German shepherd. She smiled with misty eyes and said, "I was there, you know. That night. When Blaze saved you." Lila rose, heart catching. "You were?" The woman nodded. "I lived just 2 houses down. I saw it all. And I want you to know. You two, you and that brave soul, you changed this town. You made us all a little braver, a little kinder." Tears pricked at Lila's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman squeezed her hand, then tucked the photo into Lila's palm before walking away. Lila unfolded it carefully. It was a picture of that night, the aftermath. Lila, tiny and tear-streaked, sitting on the curb with Blaze beside her, battered but unbowed. Frozen forever. Proof that courage could change the world. That night, back at her childhood home, Lila placed the photograph in a frame beside the one she kept of Blaze. Valor curled at her feet, his steady breathing a comfort against the quiet. Lila leaned back and stared at the stars through her bedroom window. She smiled. "I kept my promise," she whispered. Somewhere she believed Blaze was smiling too. Not because he was proud of the hero she had become, but because he knew she had always been one. He had only helped her see it. And now, it was her turn. To help others find their light. Just as he had. Forever. Time, as it always does, continued its relentless march. Valor, once a wild, untamed spirit, grew wiser and more disciplined. His once boundless energy mellowed into a sharp, controlled readiness. An unstoppable force, tempered by Lila's steady hand. Together, they became legends in their own right. Stories circulated about their heroics. A child saved from a house fire, a missing elder found deep within a canyon, explosives detected before tragedy could strike. Every medal they earned, every letter of gratitude they received, Lila dedicated silently to Blaze. Then came a day that would change everything again. It was an ordinary patrol shift, crisp and clear, the kind of day when danger seemed too far away to touch them. A call came over the radio. A building collapse at an abandoned construction site. Multiple people believed to be trapped. Without hesitation, Lila and Valor raced to the scene. The rubble was immense, a mountain of twisted steel and broken concrete, Screams echoed from deep within the ruins. Lila knelt beside Valor, her forehead resting lightly against his. "Find them," she whispered. Valor plunged into the wreckage without fear. Hours dragged by. Working alongside other rescuers, Valor found 3 survivors, each discovery a miracle in itself. But as dusk approached, as the rescuers began to lose hope, Valor signaled again. A sharp bark, urgent and persistent. Lila followed, heart hammering, into a narrow pocket under a collapsed girder. Inside, they found a young woman, barely conscious, pinned beneath a fallen beam. It would take heavy machinery and delicate timing to free her. The site supervisor warned Lila. "It's unstable. It could all come down." She looked into Valor's eyes. They both knew the risks. They stayed anyway. When the beam shifted with a terrifying groan, the ground trembled. The rescuers shouted, "Get out!" Lila grabbed the woman's hand, refusing to leave. Valor barked, bracing against Lila's side as the debris threatened to collapse. In a final surge, the workers lifted the beam just enough. Lila pulled the woman free. They scrambled clear moments before the remaining structure thundered down behind them. Dust and ash rained over them like a shroud. But they were alive. All of them. Later, as medics treated her scrapes and bruises, Lila sat quietly with Valor. He was exhausted, his sides heaving, but his tail thumped weakly against the ground at her touch. She pressed her forehead to his once more, tears streaming unchecked. "You saved them," she whispered. Valor's warm breath brushed her cheek, his strength grounding her once again. They had done it. Together. That night, as Lila stood on a hill overlooking the twinkling lights of the city, she made a decision. It was time to pass on the legacy. Not because her journey with Valor was ending, but because so many others needed to know what it meant to trust, to protect, to love without condition. She applied to become an instructor at the K9 Training Academy. When her application was accepted, she knew it was the right path. The academy grounds were vast and filled with energy. New recruits, eager young dogs, the sharp bark of commands, the pounding of boots on packed earth. Lila, now a seasoned handler, walked through the training fields with Valor at her side. She wore her uniform proudly, medals gleaming in the sunlight. At her first orientation, she stood before a sea of nervous young faces and said, "Today, you begin a journey that will change you. It will challenge you. And if you let it, it will reveal the very best parts of who you are." She paused, hand resting on Valor's head. "You are not just training dogs. You are building bonds that will outlast fear, pain, and even time itself." Her voice softened. "You are not alone. And you never will be." In the months that followed, Lila trained dozens of handlers and their K9 partners. She watched rookies stumble, fall, and rise again. She witnessed moments when a simple touch or a shared glance between a handler and a dog changed everything. She saw Valor's spirit echo in every wagging tail, every determined bark, every fearless leap into the unknown. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars stretched wide above the academy grounds, Lila would sit quietly outside Valor's kennel, telling stories of Blaze. New generations would learn not just the techniques of K9 work, but the heart of it. The legacy would live on. One summer evening, as the academy hosted a public demonstration, Lila stood at the podium. Families gathered. Children laughed. Hope hung thick in the warm air. Valor, now graying around the muzzle, sat proudly at her side. Lila looked out over the crowd, took a deep breath, and said, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the will to stand firm for those who cannot stand for themselves." Her eyes glistened. And sometimes, our greatest heroes walk not on 2 legs, but on 4. She stepped aside as a new group of K9 graduates paraded proudly across the field, their handlers by their sides. The crowd erupted in cheers. Valor barked once, loud, strong, proud. And somewhere beyond the sunset, Lila imagined Blaze's spirit running free, watching over them all, smiling. The years moved like rivers, swift and unstoppable. Valor, now in the twilight of his life, remained Lila's steadfast companion. His movements slowed, his naps grew longer, and the once fiery gleam in his eyes softened into a warm, enduring light. But his spirit, unbroken. One winter evening, as snow fell gently over the academy grounds, Lila sat with Valor outside their favorite training field. Lights twinkled on distant trees. The air shimmered with the promise of a new year. She stroked Valor's fur, her hand lingering as if trying to hold on to time itself. "You did good, boy," she whispered. "You did more than good." Valor rested his head on her lap, a soft sigh escaping him, a sound full of peace. That night, he passed away in his sleep, curled at her feet, just as he had so many nights before. Lila grieved deeply, but not with regret. She knew Valor had lived a life of purpose, a life filled with love and service, just like Blaze before him. In the weeks that followed, Lila found herself restless. She wandered the academy grounds, her heart heavy, but her mind alight with memories. She realized there was one more thing she needed to do, a promise she hadn't even known she made until now. She began writing. At first, just scraps and fragments, memories of Blaze, of Valor, of the countless lives touched by four-legged heroes. Then pages, then chapters. The words poured out of her like rain after a long drought. She wrote about fear and courage, loss and hope, service and love, and the quiet, steadfast bravery of those who protect without asking for anything in return. 1 year later, her book was published. Paws of Valor, Lessons from the Heroes Who Walk Among Us. It became a beacon for others, handlers, dog lovers, anyone who had ever known the fierce, silent loyalty of a dog. Lila traveled to schools, libraries, and police academies, sharing stories of Blaze and Valor. Everywhere she went, she met people whose lives had been changed by the bond between human and dog. At every event, she ended her talks with the same message. Heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Some have badges, some have scars, some have paws. But all of them have the same heart. Brave, loyal, and unbreakable. One spring morning, during a visit to Willow Creek, Lila stood before Blaze's statue once more. A group of children from the local school gathered around her, their eyes wide with wonder, as she recounted the story of the night Blaze saved her life. When she finished, a small boy raised his hand. "Do you think Blaze can still see you?" he asked. Lila smiled, a lump rising in her throat. "I know he can," she said. She looked up at the statue, at the proud bronze figure standing eternal watch over the town. And in that moment, she felt it. Not just memory, but presence. The weight of a head against her knee, the soft puff of breath against her hand. The boundless, unconditional love that neither time nor death could steal away. That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Lila walked alone through Willow Creek, a leash swinging loosely from her hand. No dog at its end, yet somehow she was not alone. Because Blaze and Valor were with her. They always had been. They always would be. And as she walked, she carried their legacy forward. One step, one heartbeat, one whispered promise at a time.